they needed to survive. In addition to all this, life in the Middle Ages in Europe was dirty. It was a dirty life. So I want to show you guys a picture of, here we go. So this on the right is a picture of what like the average peasant's house or cottage would have looked like. So they're made of wood. The roof would be thatched together with sticks, with dried leaves, really anything they could find to prevent rain from coming in. There's not much protection from the elements. The heat source was a fire, so you can imagine how smoky this would get sometimes. But the entire family would live in here. It's one room, and in addition to that, if you had any livestock, cows, sheep, goats, pigs, if the weather was cold outside and you needed these livestock to be in the room with you to make sure they didn't die, you slept with your animals. So I would take a minute and kind of process that here and just describe that to yourself. You can pause the video if you need to. All right, but in addition to the fact that it's a very localized, self-sufficient lifestyle, it's dirty, it was also very hierarchical. Hierarchical, meaning like this is a class-based society. Really, the truth is, peasants weren't allowed to do anything without the Lord's permission. You can think of it this way, like the Lord was the dictator of the manor. He basically had absolute power, right? If a peasant wanted to leave the manor, they had to get the Lord's permission first. In addition to that, everything was owned by the Lord. If you wanted to bake bread, the furnace that you would bake the bread in, that was owned by the Lord. And to be able to use that furnace, you had to pay the Lord a fee just to be able to use that. In addition, things like, I told you guys you would have a arrow on my face. They had carpenters who would, make wood, carve wood, to make tools for people. But the tools that they needed to carve the wood and everything, those were owned by the Lord. And you had to pay a fee just to be able to use those. And sometimes people would try to get around this. They'd make their own tools. Well, you could be arrested, thrown in jail for not using the Lord's tools. So really, this really is a hierarchical society. Again, I would take a second and process that, just kind of describe that to yourself. Pause the video if you need to, so that way you don't get lost. Hello. All right. Lastly, this life on the manor, there was a distinct lack of education. A distinct lack of education. Basically, the only real learning that's happening is in church monasteries by monks and priests. Because if you think about it, like in the Roman Empire, it's the Roman Empire that's paying for the schools. It's just like today. You guys don't pay me to teach you. The state pays me to teach you. So when the Roman Empire collapses, there aren't these schools to provide education for people. This also really makes sense because if you're worried about food, if you're worried about safety like these people were, you're not going to want to take a bunch of time to learn how to read and write. You're going to try and make sure that you can provide for your family. So what ends up happening is Europe starts falling behind the rest of the world in terms of education. So we're going to transition just a little bit here, but this system, the manor system, this works in Europe for about 150 years. However, European societies really started facing some large-scale invasions about 150 years after the Roman Empire collapses. This ends up leading to what we call feudalism. All right. So, feudalism. First, in terms of what it is, feudalism, I'm just going to put this on here so you can see it. Hey, these are my notes. I'm looking right here. Feudalism is a decentralized political system, and the point of feudalism was to provide protection for people. Right? Basically, I mean, think about in the Roman Empire, they had the Roman military to do that. Well, after Rome collapses, you got to find a way to protect people. And they want to do this through this series of reciprocal relationships. And basically what that means, reciprocal relationships, is like I owe you something and you owe me something in return. So that's what that's referring to. So why does it develop? Well, a lot of it has to do with these invasions. And the first group, oh, that is really zoomed in. The first group that they faced invasions from are the Vikings. So I don't know if you guys ever watch the History Channel, but they had this awesome series on called Vikings. And I actually was talking to a student the other day, and they were like, I didn't realize Vikings were real. Well, yeah, Vikings are real. And actually that show, it's sensationalized, but I mean, it's fairly accurate in terms of what the lifestyle was like. But you can see the Vikings are from up here, and they launch over the course of 100, 150 years, launch these incredibly devastating invasions on Western Europe. They come in, they destroy towns, they steal stuff, they kill people, and this terrifies the people who are living in Western Europe at the time. So that's one. The other one, though, is actually something we've already learned about. The Caliphate. So at the same time that in Western Europe they're turning to the manors, they're like, whoa, the empire fell, let's find another way to do things. At that same time, the Caliphate is expanding across North Africa, conquering Persia, and they actually they start invading up into Europe. Well, this map shows the cutoff line, but they actually got almost all the way to Paris. And so people in Europe are freaking out about the possibility that, they could be conquered, they could be taken over by these evil, barbaric Muslims. That was their view, not mine. YouTube. All right, but they're terrified that they're going to be conquered by this Muslim society and have to abandon their Christian faith. So, how does the feudal system work? How does it work? Well, to see this, flipping through my pages here. Like I said, when I defined it, it really comes down to these reciprocal relationships. This idea of I owe you, you owe me something. So it starts, let me show you this graphic. There we go. All right, it starts with the king. It starts with the king. The king, basically, as the European societies are facing these invasions, some of these lords, these nobles, they realized that they weren't able to fight off these invaders on their own. So they realized they have to team up to some extent. And at times they choose the person to be king, like they agree, okay, you're the most powerful, you should be king. Other times, one of the lords just becomes powerful enough and starts to dominate the others. In any case, they start having kings. And these kings are said to be appointed by God. So this is where we get this term, divine right. They're basically saying, God gave me the right to rule, and that's why I'm king. The kings then they give large chunks of land to their nobles, these lords. All right. In exchange, though, the lords have to pledge fealty. There's that term again. The lords have to pledge their fealty, their loyalty to the king. In addition to that, actually, let me show you this. The way that this would be expressed is like this. So this guy is representing the king, and when you pledged your fealty, it was a contract. It's a legal thing, but you had to bow before the king and place your hands inside of his hands, and it's a symbol of your submission, basically saying, I am your subject, I submit to you. So the kings pledge their fealty, and in addition, they have to provide soldiers in times of need for the king. All right. So basically, they get land and they provide soldiers in return. The flip side of this, let me go to this graphic. I'm actually just going to keep this graphic up here because I think it tells a lot more than me scribbling on my paper. So here's what we have so far. The king is on top. The king gives land to the nobles. In exchange, the nobles have to provide money and soldiers for the king when he needs it. All right? The nobles, though, they then divide up their land into smaller manors. So that's where the manors come in. And in charge of each manor, they place a knight. So yes, knights were real. Yes, they wore armor. All that stuff is true. And these knights are the lords who were in charge of the manors we were describing earlier. In exchange, when they get this land, they too have to provide military service to the nobles, and they have to provide taxes and so on at certain times. And then, as we already discussed, the knights then, these lords, allow the peasants to live on their land. They provide protection for those peasants, but in return, the peasants have to pledge their loyalty to the knights, and they also have to give them these taxes. All right. So, in essence, what this comes down to is you're exchanging